Pindaros was born into a distinguished family in the region of Boeotia, an area known for its rugged landscapes and strong local traditions. His birthplace, near Thebes, exposed him early to a society shaped by ancient aristocratic values, competitive festivals, and deep religious devotion. Growing up in this environment surrounded him with stories of heroes, local myths, and the shared memory of Theban glory, all of which later influenced his poetic themes. The cultural environment of Boeotia was a blend of rural simplicity and proud civic heritage, an atmosphere that left a lasting impression on Pindaros's imagination. His family belonged to a respected aristocratic lineage, and this background granted him both education and access to intellectual circles that were not available to everyone. From a young age, he was encouraged to study music, lyric composition, and the structured performance traditions that defined Greek choral poetry. These early lessons were not just artistic training. They also served as a gateway into the values of honor, excellence, and inherited prestige that dominated Boeotian elite culture. Through his relatives and mentors, Pindaros learned how poetry functioned as a medium of celebration and memory for noble families. The traditions of his hometown played a crucial role in shaping his worldview. Boeotia, with its long-standing rivalry with neighboring Greek regions, fostered a sense of pride and resilience among its citizens. Pindaros grew up witnessing the importance of public festivals, athletic contests, and religious ceremonies that demanded both discipline and communal participation. These experiences helped form his deep respect for victory, divine favor, and moral order, concepts that later became central pillars in his odes celebrating athletes and champions across the Greek world. Although he eventually gained fame far beyond Boeotia, the foundations laid in his early years never left him. His poetic voice consistently reflected the values he absorbed during childhood: reverence for the gods, admiration for noble families, and a belief that human achievement was meaningful only when accompanied by proper respect and humility. In this sense, Pindaros carried the spirit of Boeotia with him throughout his career, transforming his local upbringing into a universal lyrical language that resonated across the Greek world. Pindaros's early education in Thebes began with rigorous musical instruction, a foundation considered essential for any aspiring lyric poet in the Greek world. Thebes was renowned for its musical academies and long-standing traditions of choral performance, giving young students access to skilled flute players, lyre teachers, and chorus masters. Under their supervision, Pindaros learned not only technical skill, but also how rhythm and melody could shape emotion and elevate spoken language. This exposure introduced him to the disciplined environment in which poetry, music, and performance were inseparable. His studies soon expanded beyond simple musical exercises. He was taught the complex structures of lyric composition, including how to blend stories of gods and heroes with the celebratory tone required for public festivals. In Thebes, instructors emphasized the balance between poetic inspiration and intellectual craftsmanship. Pindaros trained his ear to recognize subtle differences in pitch and cadence, while his teachers guided him in the art of crafting vivid, dignified imagery. These lessons cultivated a strong sense of artistic responsibility, teaching him that every line in a song carried cultural and spiritual weight. Life in Thebes also exposed him to a vibrant performance culture. Public celebrations, gymnasium gatherings, and seasonal religious rituals offered countless opportunities to observe professional singers and choruses. Watching them, He learned how a well-crafted song could strengthen civic pride, honor victorious athletes, and preserve communal memory. These early observations helped him understand the relationship between performer and audience, and how poetry could serve as both entertainment and moral instruction. Through such experiences, he developed a natural instinct for writing odes that resonated widely. As his education progressed, Pindaros became increasingly aware of the broader artistic networks that connected Thebes to other Greek cities. Traveling musicians, visiting poets, and festival delegations often passed through the region, bringing with them new styles and techniques. Their presence demonstrated that lyrical mastery required adaptability and constant learning. This realization pushed Pindaros to refine his skills with determination. By the end of his formative years, he possessed not only technical training, but also a confident artistic identity shaped by the cultural energy of Thebes, preparing him for the distinguished career that followed. Pindaros's time in Athens marked a turning point in his intellectual development, introducing him to a cultural environment far broader and more sophisticated than what he had known in Thebes. Athens was a thriving center of artistic experimentation, philosophical debate, and theatrical innovation, and its vibrant atmosphere offered him constant stimulation. As he studied there, he encountered new forms of musical technique and poetic structure that expanded his understanding of what lyric art could achieve. The city's openness to different ideas helped him refine his own voice while sharpening his sense of artistic purpose. One of the most significant experiences of his Athenian education was direct exposure to the works of earlier classical poets. Through recitations, musical contests, and literary discussions, he became intimately familiar with the verses of Sappho, Alcaeus, and Anacreon. Hearing these poets performed in public spaces allowed him to observe how an audience reacted to shifts in tone, rhythm, and emotional nuance. Their mastery of personal expression, thematic clarity, and musical precision offered him models to admire and eventually surpass. These encounters also encouraged him to explore a richer emotional palette in his own writing. The intellectual community of Athens fostered an environment where young artists were encouraged to question, compare, and experiment. Pindaros often joined conversations with teachers, musicians, and fellow students about style, tradition, and the evolving role of poetry in Greek life. These exchanges taught him that poetry was not simply a decorative art, but a form of cultural leadership. As he absorbed Athenian perspectives on heroism, morality, and civic identity, he began integrating broader ethical themes into his lyrics. The city's mixture of intellectual rigor and artistic freedom shaped his approach to blending mythological narrative with contemporary celebration. During his stay, he also attended festivals such as the Panathenaia, where the greatest poets and performers gathered to compete. Observing these contests revealed how poetry could function on a grand civic stage. It demanded bold imagery, confident delivery, and a profound understanding of audience expectations. Witnessing this standard firsthand motivated him to elevate his work beyond local traditions. By the time he returned to his home region, he carried with him a refined artistic philosophy forged in Athens, one that combined technical mastery with a deeper appreciation for the cultural and emotional power of lyric poetry. Pindaros's earliest compositions emerged from a period of experimentation when he sought to translate his extensive training into a distinct poetic voice. In these formative years, he produced short choral pieces, hymns, and occasional songs crafted for local festivals or private celebrations. These works allowed him to test his command of rhythm, mythological imagery, and musical phrasing. Although still developing, his early poems already displayed the poised structure and firm moral tone that would later define his mature style. Each composition became a small laboratory in which he explored how language, music, and tradition could work together to honor individuals and gods. His first opportunities for public recital came during regional festivals in Boeotia and nearby cities, where young poets were invited to present pieces before diverse audiences. These occasions required confidence as well as technical skill, since public performance demanded clarity, precision, and emotional presence. Pindaros approached these stages with seriousness, understanding that a successful recital could enhance his reputation among patrons and civic leaders. The reactions he received, whether applause, discussion, or critique, helped him recognize what audiences valued in a lyric poem and how effective storytelling could heighten the glory of a celebratory moment. As his work gained attention, he began composing for more formal events, especially athletic celebrations, where victors sought songs to commemorate their triumphs. These commissions were particularly important, for they introduced him to the tradition of epinician poetry that he would later elevate to unprecedented heights. Through these early recitals, Pindaros refined his sense of timing, learned how to guide the emotional arc of a performance, and developed a keen awareness of the expectations held by the wealthy families who sponsored public festivities. Each successful appearance strengthened his credibility and broadened his circle of patrons. Over time, the combination of growing confidence and rising demand encouraged him to undertake more ambitious projects. He expanded the scale of his compositions, incorporating complex mythological digressions and sophisticated metrical arrangements. Audiences began to recognize in his performances a rare balance of grandeur and discipline, qualities that distinguished him from other emerging poets of his generation. These early public experiences provided the practical foundation upon which he built his later career, shaping him into a poet capable of blending artistic refinement with public celebration in a way that resonated throughout the Greek world. Pindar's relationship with Delphi began early in his career and grew into one of the defining influences on his poetic identity. Delphi was not only a religious center, but also a cultural crossroads where musicians, poets, and dignitaries from across the Greek world gathered. When Pindar first visited the sanctuary, he encountered an atmosphere filled with ritual intensity, artistic competition, and political symbolism. The sacred landscape, mountain slopes, laurel groves, and the imposing temple of Apollo left a powerful impression on him, reinforcing his belief that poetry was inseparable from divine presence. The cult of Apollo, with its emphasis on harmony, order, and prophetic insight, aligned naturally with Pindar's artistic values. Apollo was revered as the god of music and truth, and his association with the Muses made him the spiritual patron of all disciplined creativity. In Delphi, Pindar observed the ceremonies dedicated to Apollo, the processions of priests, and the musical contests held in the god's honor. These experiences deepened his conviction that poetic inspiration was a sacred gift, something to be approached with humility and reverence. Apollo became not merely a mythic character in his verses, but a guiding force shaping the ethical tone of his work. Pindar's connection with the Pythian games further strengthened his ties to Delphi. Composing songs for athletes who triumphed in these prestigious competitions allowed him to blend mythological narrative with religious devotion in a uniquely Delphic spirit. His Pythian odes reflect a blend of triumph and piety, celebrating human excellence while reminding listeners of divine oversight. Through these commissions, Pindar developed a distinctive ability to link contemporary victories with timeless moral lessons grounded in the authority of Apollo's sanctuary. This approach elevated his poetry beyond simple praise, giving it a sacred resonance recognized throughout Greece. Repeated visits to the shrine also exposed Pindar to the wider political and cultural networks that revolved around Delphi. City-states sought the oracle's guidance, aristocratic families offered lavish dedications, and artists competed for prestige, creating a dynamic environment where poetry served both religious and diplomatic purposes. Pindar learned to navigate this world with skill, crafting odes that honored patrons while preserving the solemn dignity expected in a place governed by Apollo. His enduring association with Delphi became a hallmark of his career, giving his poetry a spiritual depth and cultural authority that set him apart from his contemporaries. Pindar's rise to prominence began with a steady accumulation of commissions from aristocratic families who recognized the unusual dignity and clarity of his poetic voice. As his early works circulated among these influential circles, requests for new compositions multiplied, drawing him into a network of patrons from across the Greek world. His reputation grew not through sudden success, but through consistent excellence. Each ode he produced revealed a deeper understanding of tradition, myth, and moral insight. This dependable mastery made him a favored poet for occasions that demanded grandeur and spiritual depth. His breakthrough came when his eponychian odes began reaching audiences far beyond Boeotia. Victors from cities like Aegina, Syracuse, and Cyrene turned to him for songs that immortalized their achievements. These commissions granted him the opportunity to showcase his skill in blending contemporary triumphs with ancient mythical narratives, creating a structure that honored both personal glory and divine order. The precision of his language, combined with his ability to elevate a single victory into a universal moral lesson, distinguished him from other lyric poets of his age. His work resonated because it fused emotional power with intellectual refinement. As Pindar mastered this genre, his style became unmistakable, majestic, complex, and imbued with a solemn respect for spiritual forces. His poems avoided simple flattery, instead insisting that human success must be framed within the limits set by the gods. This moral emphasis gave his odes a sense of authority that appealed to leaders seeking legitimacy and cultural prestige. His growing fame led to invitations from powerful courts, including the rulers of Sicily, where he encountered vibrant artistic communities that further sharpened his craftsmanship. Each engagement expanded his influence and deepened the sophistication of his poetry. Over time, Pindar's status evolved from that of a talented regional poet into a figure of pan-Hellenic significance. Cities honored him with gifts, patrons sought his blessing through song, and generations of performers preserved his works in public festivals. His voice became synonymous with the highest ideals of Greek lyric tradition: honor, moderation, and devotion to the divine. By the height of his career, Pindar had achieved a rare position. He was not only admired for his technical brilliance, but revered as a moral interpreter of victory itself. His ascent marked a defining moment in Greek cultural history, securing his legacy as one of the greatest lyric poets of antiquity. Pindar's earliest commissions from aristocratic families emerged at a time when elite households across Greece relied on skilled poets to commemorate victories, marriages, and religious dedications. These families valued lyric poetry not merely as entertainment, but as a symbol of lineage, prestige, and cultural refinement. When Pindar's talent began attracting attention, several noble patrons sought him out to craft songs that would preserve their achievements for future generations. These initial requests provided him with a platform to demonstrate his ability to blend grandeur with disciplined structure, earning him respect among influential circles. The aristocrats who commissioned his early works were drawn to his distinctive approach, which avoided casual praise and instead framed individual success within a broader moral and mythological narrative. Pindar understood that aristocratic identity was built on ancestry, divine favor, and public honor. So he crafted poems that reinforced these ideals with dignity and solemnity. His odes often connected the patron's victory to heroic traditions or sacred stories, placing contemporary achievements in a timeless context. This method satisfied the noble desire for both personal glory and cultural legitimacy, ensuring that his compositions were received with admiration. As his patronage network expanded, Pindar became familiar with the expectations and sensitivities of elite households. He learned how to navigate their competitive pride, their desire for distinction, and their need for careful representation in public festivals. Each commission required tailored imagery and precise moral tone, demanding a high level of artistic adaptability. Through these experiences, he discovered how to maintain his own principles while honoring the ambitions of those who supported him. His ability to balance artistic independence with patron loyalty became one of the defining strengths of his career. These early commissions also introduced him to the financial and social benefits of serving aristocratic patrons. Gifts, travel opportunities, and invitations to major celebrations broadened his horizons and allowed him to engage with distant Greek communities. This exposure enriched his understanding of regional customs and widened his imaginative resources. By the time his reputation began to spread across the Mediterranean, Pindar had already built a foundation of trust and admiration among some of the most powerful families of Greece, setting the stage for the expansive and influential career that would follow. Pindar's connection with Hieron I of Syracuse began during a period when Sicilian courts were becoming major centers of Greek cultural life. Hieron sought to attract the finest poets, musicians, and intellectuals to enhance the prestige of his rule, and Pindar quickly stood out as a voice capable of giving political victories a timeless poetic form. The tyrant commissioned odes to celebrate military success, civic achievements, and aristocratic values that he wished to project across the Greek world. Pindar responded by crafting compositions that praised Hieron's leadership, while simultaneously situating his accomplishments within a divine moral order. The relationship between poet and ruler was complex, shaped by both admiration and careful negotiation. Pindar respected Hieron's ambition and generosity, but he refused to produce uncritical flattery. In his poems, he acknowledged the tyrant's power while reminding him of the importance of justice, moderation, and reverence for the gods. This delicate balance allowed Pindar to maintain artistic integrity, giving his odes a tone of elevated seriousness rather than political propaganda. His willingness to speak honestly set him apart from court poets who catered solely to a ruler's vanity. Other Sicilian tyrants, such as Theron of Acragas, also turned to Pindar for poetic celebration. These commissions provided the poet with opportunities to explore themes of civic harmony, heroic ancestry, and divine favor, concepts that appealed to rulers seeking to justify their authority. Sicily's wealth and vibrant cultural landscape offered Pindar new audiences and artistic challenges, pushing him to create odes with richer imagery and more elaborate narrative frameworks. The cross-cultural environment of the island, blending Greek traditions with local influences, stimulated his imagination and broadened the emotional range of his poetry. Through his interactions with Sicilian courts, Pindar gained not only patronage, but a deeper understanding of the political tensions and aspirations that shaped the Western Greek world. His ability to transform a ruler's achievements into moral exemplars earned him lasting respect among the island's elites. At the same time, these experiences strengthened his belief that poetic celebration must always reflect divine justice and human responsibility. His engagement with Hieron I and other Sicilian tyrants ultimately contributed to the maturity of his poetic voice, allowing him to combine artistic ambition with a clear ethical vision that resonated long after the rulers themselves had passed from memory. The creation of Pindar's victory odes marked a decisive moment in the evolution of Greek lyric poetry. These compositions, known as epinikia, were written to honor athletes who triumphed in major Pan-Hellenic games such as Olympia, Delphi, Nemea, and the Isthmus. Pindar approached these commissions with a vision that exceeded simple celebration. He saw each victory as an opportunity to explore the relationship between human excellence and divine order, weaving together present achievement with mythological memory. This creative method allowed him to transform a fleeting athletic triumph into a lasting monument of poetic grandeur. Central to the structure of the epinikia was Pindar's ability to balance praise with narrative depth. Rather than focusing solely on the athlete, he introduced mythic episodes that illustrated moral lessons or reflected broader cultural values. These stories were chosen not at random, but with careful attention to the character and heritage of the victor's city or family. By connecting a modern success to an ancient heroic tradition, Pindar gave each ode a sense of continuity between past and present. This technique elevated the composition from a personal tribute to a reflection on communal identity and divine favor. Musicality played a vital role in shaping the emotional impact of these odes. Pindar composed them for performance by trained choruses, ensuring that rhythm, melody, and movement worked in harmony with the poetic message. The odes often opened with a bold invocation, followed by shifts in tempo that guided the audience through cycles of celebration, reflection, and moral insight. This dynamic form allowed the poem to unfold almost theatrically, capturing both the energy of athletic competition and the solemnity of religious dedication. The careful interplay between sound and meaning became one of the hallmarks of his style. As his mastery of the epinikia grew, so did his influence across the Greek world. Victorious athletes and powerful families sought him out, recognizing that a Pindaric ode conferred immense prestige. The compositions not only preserved individual achievements, but also promoted ideals such as courage, discipline, and respect for the gods. Through these odes, Pindar articulated a worldview in which human glory was always contingent upon divine blessing and moral restraint. His ability to combine myth, ethics, and musical artistry made the Eponychia the pinnacle of his poetic career and secured their place as some of the most enduring works of classical literature. Pindar's career soon required him to travel widely, as cities and aristocratic families across Greece sought his presence at major celebrations. These journeys exposed him to a remarkable variety of landscapes, dialects, and local traditions, broadening his understanding of the cultural diversity that shaped the Greek world. Whether he traveled to the islands of the Aegean, the prosperous cities of Sicily, or the grand sanctuaries of central Greece, each destination offered new audiences and fresh artistic challenges. His mobility strengthened his reputation as a poet whose voice resonated far beyond his Boeotian origins. During these travels, Pindar often attended festivals where his odes were performed by trained choruses, giving him the opportunity to supervise rehearsals and ensure that the musical and rhythmic elements matched his poetic intentions. Observing these performances firsthand allowed him to refine his sense of how choral movement, instrumental accompaniment, and vocal interplay could amplify the emotional force of his compositions. Each performance became a collaboration between poet and community, revealing how deeply Greek cities valued the role of song in shaping public memory and civic pride. The hospitality extended to Pindar by his patrons offered him unique insight into regional aristocratic cultures. In private gatherings, he witnessed how noble families used poetry to reinforce lineage, celebrate achievements, and honor the gods. These encounters helped him tailor his compositions to the identity of each city, whether emphasizing naval power for Aeginetans, athletic tradition for the Rhodians, or civic harmony for Sicilian patrons. His ability to adapt without compromising his own artistic principles reflected the sophistication of a poet capable of speaking to many communities with equal authority. Over time, his extensive travels contributed to a deeper philosophical understanding of the Greek world's shared values. He saw firsthand how different cities interpreted concepts such as honor, piety, and excellence, and he used this knowledge to craft poems that appealed to a broad audience while retaining a distinctive moral tone. The experiences gained on the road enriched his imagination and sharpened his poetic craft, enabling him to produce odes that captured both the individuality of a patron and the universal ideals of Greek culture. Through his journeys, Pindar became not only a celebrated poet, but a witness to the cultural unity and variety that defined the ancient Greek world. Pindar's close interactions with athletes formed a crucial part of his artistic development, giving him direct insight into the discipline, ambition, and personal stories behind each victory he celebrated. Meeting champions who trained for years to compete at Olympia, Delphi, or Nemea allowed him to craft odes that captured not only their triumphs, but also the struggles that shaped them. These conversations revealed the emotional stakes of athletic competition, the pride of families, the expectations of cities, and the intense pressure of public judgment. Such encounters helped Pindar portray victory as a human achievement shaped by perseverance and divine favor. His relationship with musicians added another dimension to his poetic craft. Working with flute players, lyre performers, and chorus leaders taught him how sound could transform a poem into a powerful communal experience. These collaborations showed him the importance of pacing, vocal clarity, and rhythmic balance, especially during large public performances. Musicians also shared new melodic techniques and regional styles, which enriched his understanding of Greek musical diversity. Through them, Pindar learned to think of his odes not simply as written works, but as living compositions meant to resonate through coordinated voices and instruments. Rhapsodes, professional reciters of epic poetry, introduced Pindar to another layer of performance culture. Watching them recite Homeric verses with dramatic gestures and controlled emotion helped him appreciate the art of storytelling in its most public form. Their mastery of narrative continuity, vocal modulation, and audience engagement offered valuable lessons about how myth could be communicated effectively. Although Pindar's own works were lyric rather than epic, the confidence and authority with which rhapsodes delivered their material influenced his belief that poetry required both intellectual depth and performative strength. The exchanges he shared with these diverse groups shaped his understanding of the interconnected world of Greek performance. Athletes showed him the human side of glory, musicians taught him the technical heart of composition, and rhapsodes demonstrated the power of narrative tradition. Each group contributed something unique to his artistic perspective, enabling him to craft odes that were emotionally rich, musically sophisticated, and deeply rooted in cultural memory. These interactions reinforced his belief that poetry was a collaborative art, one that drew its vitality from the many voices, talents, and stories that surrounded him across the Greek world. Pindar's poetry was deeply shaped by the religious worldview that permeated Greek life, especially the belief that human actions were always subject to divine oversight. From an early stage in his career, he emphasized the idea that success came not only from personal effort, but also from the favor of the gods. This conviction informed the tone of his odes, which often reminded audiences of the limits of human ambition and the unpredictability of fortune. His reverence for divine justice created a moral framework in which victory was celebrated, yet always tempered by humility and awareness of cosmic order. Philosophically, Pindar drew inspiration from the emerging ethical ideas of the archaic and early classical periods. He was fascinated by themes such as moderation, self-knowledge, and the pursuit of excellence tempered by restraint. These ideas appeared repeatedly in his reflections on athletic triumphs and civic pride. Rather than presenting strength and success as purely physical achievements, he framed them as expressions of moral character. His poems often urged listeners to acknowledge the transient nature of human life, encouraging a balanced outlook that valued integrity as highly as accomplishment. Religious tradition played a central role in shaping the mythological content of his work. Pindar did not use myth simply as decoration. He employed it as a source of ethical instruction and cultural continuity. Stories of gods and heroes were carefully selected to mirror the values he wished to highlight: courage, loyalty, reverence, and the dangers of excessive pride. By weaving these narratives into contemporary celebrations, he created a bridge between distant legendary pasts and the living world of his patrons. His treatment of myth revealed a belief that divine stories remained relevant because they illuminated universal truths about human behavior. His poetic voice was also influenced by a mystical sense of the divine as an active, guiding presence in daily life. Pindar frequently portrayed the gods as guardians of justice who rewarded virtue and punished arrogance. This perspective gave his odes a solemn, almost prophetic quality, suggesting that poetry itself was a medium through which sacred truth could be expressed. His ability to blend moral reflection with religious symbolism created a style that felt both authoritative and transcendent. These philosophical and spiritual influences helped shape Pindar into a poet whose work sought not only to praise achievement, but to illuminate the deeper forces that governed human destiny. In the later decades of his life, Pindar stood in Thebes not merely as a renowned poet, but as a cultural figure whose reputation had become a source of civic pride. His city, long known for its military traditions and rich mythological heritage, now regarded him as a living testament to Boeotian excellence. Visiting dignitaries, traveling performers, and ambitious students often asked for introductions to him, hoping to witness firsthand the intellect responsible for the most celebrated victory odes in the Greek world. Thebes honored him with privileges typically reserved for statesmen or victorious generals, recognizing that his artistry elevated the city's reputation across Greece far more effectively than political alliances or military campaigns. His home became an informal center of artistic exchange. Young poets visited to hear his insights on structure and meter, while musicians sought his judgment on new melodic styles. He rarely presented himself as a formal teacher, but his observations, rooted in decades of experience, shaped the next generation of performers. Local elites treated him with deep respect, often inviting him to private gatherings where discussions ranged from mythology to civic responsibilities. Although Pindar avoided political entanglements, his opinions carried weight. Many Thebans believed that a man who understood divine order so profoundly deserved to be heard on matters of public importance. With advancing age, he shifted his creative focus toward more reflective compositions, favoring themes that explored human limitation, the fleeting nature of fortune, and the enduring presence of divine justice. These later poems display a heightened sense of introspection, as though he was increasingly aware of the horizon of life approaching. Yet even in these quieter works, the precision of expression and adherence to moral clarity remained unmistakable. Thebes responded to this stage of his career by honoring him as one of the city's guiding voices. His name was invoked in religious ceremonies, athletic celebrations, and communal events, symbolizing the spirit of piety and excellence that he spent a lifetime articulating. Despite his age, Pindar maintained an itinerant lifestyle well into his final years, continuing to visit cities that had become essential parts of his professional world. Among these was Argos, a place whose heroic associations and musical traditions deeply appealed to him. His visits to Argos were marked by warm receptions from aristocratic families who admired not only the grandeur of his poetry, but the ethical discipline that lay beneath it. During one such visit, when he was already advanced in years, he chose to remain for an extended period, enjoying the hospitality of a household that had long considered him a close friend. Accounts of his final days describe a man who retained clarity of mind and commitment to craft even as physical strength waned. He spent much of his time exchanging stories with local musicians, reflecting on his journeys, and discussing the spiritual themes that had guided his life's work. Although far from Thebes, he did not feel isolated. Argos offered him a community that valued the same principles of divine guidance, heroic memory, and civic virtue that shaped his poetry. In this atmosphere of respect and familiarity, he gradually withdrew from public life, devoting himself to contemplation and quiet conversations. His death in Argos was peaceful, neither dramatic nor marked by illness. but simply the cessation of long-lived strength. News of his passing traveled quickly through the Greek world, carried by performers and travelers who had witnessed his influence firsthand. The Argives honored him with ceremonies befitting a man whose art had touched countless cities. When his body was later returned to Boeotia, Thebes held its own commemorations, acknowledging that it had lost one of the greatest cultural figures in its history. His passing marked the end of a poetic era, yet his voice continued to resonate long after he was gone. After Pindar's death, his poetry acquired an almost sacred status in Greek intellectual life. Schools of rhetoric preserved his verses as models of elevated language, while musicians continued to perform his odes at festivals long after the circumstances that inspired them had faded. His writings were treated not merely as artistic works, but as repositories of moral wisdom, embodying a worldview that linked human endeavor to divine order. Philosophers frequently cited him when discussing fate, justice, and the responsibilities of excellence, acknowledging that his insights bridged poetry and ethical reflection in a way few others had achieved. His influence extended to the great dramatists of Athens, who borrowed structural elements and thematic ideas from his lyric tradition. Tragedians admired his ability to weave mythological narratives into contemporary settings, a technique that shaped their own exploration of heroic memory and divine influence. In the Hellenistic period, scholars at Alexandria undertook the first major attempt to preserve and organize his surviving works, recognizing that the complexity of his language and meter required careful study. Their commentaries helped secure Pindar's place in the canon, ensuring that future generations could appreciate the intricacy of his craft. Roman poets later embraced his work with enthusiasm, seeing in his odes a model for elevating contemporary subjects through mythic parallels and moral reflection. Writers such as Horatius drew directly from Pindaric structure, adapting its grandeur to Latin literature. His impact persisted through late antiquity and into the medieval and Renaissance periods, when scholars rediscovered his surviving fragments and celebrated his role as a master of lyrical form. Even in modern scholarship, Pindar is seen as a poet who shaped the vocabulary of honor, the language of virtue, and the cultural meaning of victory across centuries. Ultimately, Pindar's posthumous legacy rests on more than technical achievement. His poetry captured the spiritual tension of the Greek world, a society striving for glory, yet continually reminded of divine boundaries. By articulating this balance with unmatched depth, he left behind a literary inheritance that influenced Western thought for millennia.